Welcome to the Sanity Project podcast, where you can awaken your mind to clarity and success even in today's life challenges. We're here to provide insights and solutions that will help you live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Here's your host, Joanne Victoria.
Hello, everybody. This is Joanne Victoria with another amazing episode of the Sanity Project podcast. You are here to discover a life of clarity, confidence, sanity, and entrepreneurial success. Our guest today is Kathryn Burmeister. Kathryn Burmeister is a native of Atlanta and is the second in her family to graduate college, earning her bachelor's and law degrees from Mercer University. She is a lawyer, author, speaker, and mentor and coach. Kathryn started her own law firm in October of 2018 and focuses exclusively on personal injury by giving a voice to those that have been hurt because of someone else. She wrote her first book, Overcoming Addiction to the Status Quo, in 2020 and began speaking about self-care, business, and law the same year. Her passion for helping others is a theme that crosses between her presentations. Welcome to the show, Kathryn Burmeister.
Thank you for having me, Joanne. I really appreciate it.
Well, I am grateful that you're here, and I know our audience is as well, because they are dealing with most of the situations that you have dealt with as well. So you said you wanted to talk about your story about hitting rock bottom. When I don't know what rock bottom means to you, but I know that, well, what does rock bottom mean to you?
Right. So it's really what you would assume, it to be. So when I kind of aside about the book, Overcoming Addiction to the Status Quo, when I use the word addiction, I'm not being flippant. I genuinely believe that as a society and individually, we have this obsession with living our lives based on internal and external validation. And we do it to the point of our own detriment and the detriment of others. So in that regard, it very much is an addiction. We know it's not good for us, but we still do it, and there's negative consequences. So when I say rock bottom, I hit my rock bottom of my addiction to the status quo, and that manifested in a very drastic way for me. And so that's what I mean when I say hitting rock bottom.
I know everybody else is thinking about their own rock bottom, if they've reached it or not. And certainly for the last, 3 years, I've thrown away a couple of those 3 years myself, but people have hit rock bottom.
Well, I think the biggest thing to remember, too, is you don't have to get to that point. And that's what my goal in writing the book was. We talk a lot about, and it's good, we talk about on a spectrum of stress from, 1 to 10, we talk about the 8, 9, and 10, right? When people get to the point that they're suicidal or, having suicidal ideations, and that's good. We need to identify that. But I think the bigger conversation is having a dialogue about at the beginning of 1 and what that looks like all the way to 5. How does that manifest for somebody? And being aware of it so we don't hopefully get to 8, 9, and 10 where you're hitting rock bottom. So the biggest thing to take away from this is, even though you may not have hit rock bottom, first of all, thank goodness you haven't. I'm very happy for you. But how do we keep you from getting there at any point? And how do you help people who maybe are on that path already?
So you're talking about the 1 through 5, and you're hoping to catch people at that time before they accelerate to 8, 9, or 10. So what would you say is a 1?
1 is just existing, quite frankly.
Being alive.
Everybody's there together. No, and I even talk about in my book, I love the science behind things. So really looking into, okay, what does stress do to us on a biological level? How has it manifested historically? And when I say historically, I mean, millions of years ago for us. And how does it manifest now? So when we were being chased by tigers or whatever form of that, existed in the past for us, that was stress. Surviving day to day was stress. Now, we typically, and I'm making generalizations, in Western first world countries are not having a problem with things chasing us to eat us, right? We are just focusing on getting up in front of people to do presentations, dealing with relationship, conflict, going to work, trying to get a promotion. So stress manifests in a very different way, but it doesn't mean it is any different biologically to us. So our brain still registers it the same. So the reality is you're never going to get rid of stress, but like a lot of things, it serves a purpose. It's just knowing what that purpose is and recognizing it for what it is, and then being able to walk away from it or handle it in a healthy way.
So that I would guess is where your balanced, healthy, happier life comes in, when you want to help people have better work-life balance so they don't even hit 4 or 5.
Absolutely. And I'll let you in on a little secret. And when I tell other people this, they kind of get shocked for a second. There is no such thing as work-life balance. There is such thing as living a life that is measured based on what you value. And it's getting people recentered on what they want out of life. And that's the biggest thing. People don't know how to get to where they want to be if they don't know who they are and where they are right now. So understanding that concept and then getting them from point A to point B is what I help them do. But the biggest hurdle I have is, quite frankly, people realizing or not that they have a problem and then being willing to do something to change it. Those are the two biggest hurdles for me.
Yes, it is a commitment.
100%. And people would love it if it was a checklist. I'm a recovering box checker, so I appreciate that. But unfortunately,
I love it.
Yes, a recovering one. And unfortunately, though, it is a lifelong process. But I do have good news. It gets easier, like a lot of things. And I liken the experience and the process to overcoming addiction to the status quo in your life as to that of hiking a mountain, right? We all are going to hike this mountain of life, and we're going to have hurdles, and we're going to have challenges, and we're going to have good things and good views. But if we prepare ourselves and we train, we have the right gear, which in the analogy is, working on our mental health, being aware of our triggers, and really focusing on what matters to us in the long term. That makes the experience so much easier. And once you commit to that, it gets easier the more you do it.
Yeah, as people don't realize that they've established patterns in their brain, and those patterns keep them stuck where they are. And unless they're willing to change that by even acknowledging they have patterns, the pattern of stress, for example, they won't be able to move forward.
Exactly. And what's really difficult, like I said, is getting people to recognize they have a problem. And I think one of the biggest reasons that is, in society, we look at chemical addiction, and that's more normalized now. So alcohol, drugs, things like that. There are groups for people to go to have those conversations, and people identify it more, or identify that it exists, I think, more easily. So for an addiction to the status quo, and this is not a competition for who has the worst addiction, but only to say that to the status quo, it's a action, it's a lifestyle, it's not a chemical dependence. So there aren't groups for it. It's really hard to identify because it manifests differently for everybody in different ways. And then on top of it, it's socially validated. So it's kind of like it was with alcohol early on, in the middle of last century. People would go to, work, go to lunch, have 4 or 5 drinks, and then go back to work functioning, kind of, sort of, it was normalized. And we've got this with the status quo. We're all normalizing it. So nobody thinks they have a problem if everybody's doing the same thing around them.
It's true. I remember those old days, and I used to watch people drinking at lunch and trying to figure out how they got anything accomplished. Mm-hmm. But they adjusted their mind and their body the same way they adjust to anything else.
Well, and people are really high functioning. Let's face it. In that situation, there's plenty of high functioning alcoholics. And in the case of the status quo, we function insanely high level because we have to. There really isn't another choice. And I think one of the good things to come out of COVID is the fact that it forced everybody to realize that maybe they weren't happy doing what they'd been doing and the way they've been doing it. So I know so many stories of people being at home and around their family and actually being able to enjoy their time at dinner with the kids and being able to spend more time, being with their neighbors or with their pets or things like that. So it's forced us to really look at what we should have been looking at all along, but that's part of the status quo. We have this idea that we're not successful or our value is determined by what we accomplish instead of who we are.
Well, all the gods had their plan, and they just said, stop. And How can we get your attention?
This is it.
This is it. Well, it had to be extreme in order for it to affect as many people as it did.
Absolutely.
It couldn't be one of those easy peasy kind of things because people are stubborn and they were also high functioning in whatever addiction that they had.
Yes. Yes.
So what would you say is the first thing that someone today who may or may not be addicted to the status quo and doesn't even know that they are, but they're willing to take a chance? My listeners, for example, because they're always ready to, do something, not necessarily check a box, but write. I'm big on planning. I'm big on supporting planning and, pen and paper, yellow pads and pens. So what could the listeners do just to take a walk through their life?
Yeah, take an inventory of who you are, and it's going to be more difficult than saying if you check all these boxes, you are addicted to the status quo, but it typically manifests in different ways, including I am exhausted. I have no time for the things that I enjoy. I don't feel like I'm fulfilling a purpose or I have a purpose. Being unhappy no matter what you do or accomplish. So really tapping into how you're feeling, and then past that, why are you feeling that way? And 9 times out of 10, it's something that's just not being fulfilled in your life. And that's because of the status quo, consuming you entirely, being burned out, by all that you're trying to accomplish, and acting differently in your personal and professional life. Those are, that's a really big one for me. A lot of coaches will look at your business life or your professional life, which they definitely serve their purpose. But for me, I focus on the entire person. I don't believe in siloing the individual off for what I'm doing, because you should be the constant across all parts of your life. And to the extent that you can get someone to that point, which I have, that's what you need to do. That's when you're living the most authentic version of yourself. And being authentic allows you to live the best version of yourself, which means being happy and whatever happiness means to you.
Yes, people have to start telling themselves their truth.
Yep.
And not holding on to old ways of living.
Well, it's terrifying. I don't make this, I don't ever say that this is easy. It literally took me, like I said, hitting my rock bottom, but it is so incredibly worth it, because the worst thing that to me that can happen is you get to the end of your life and you look back and have regrets. And by that point, no matter what you believe afterwards, it's too late for this life.
Right.
So, and best case scenario, you live to be, in your 80s and 90s, and not to be grim, but anything can happen to us today, tomorrow. We don't know. And while we all have bills to pay, we all have obligations to meet. I'm aware of that. But what we can do is encounter life and our obligations in a way that's healthy and allows us to enjoy it within the best of our abilities.
And don't give up on yourself.
No, because sometimes it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. And that's just part of the process. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But what I can say is everybody who's done it is incredibly empowered, confident in their identity, and at peace. I think that's really what it is being at peace with yourself and existing with who you truly are in a way that is positive.
Yeah, peace is important to me, and I express that a lot to my clients and prospects and pretty much everybody in a conversation or when I write, because peace is what it's all about. Mm-hmm. And if you can get to joy, then you're really good.
Yep.
Both at the same time, then you can just go away. And I don't want to come back with another lifetime, personally. I've been here too many times, and I don't think I have to come back. Yeah. So I will tell my audience again, as I do in every episode, after you listen to this episode, some of you may be driving and listening to this, or running or bicycling or whatever you're doing, listen to it again, but have that pen and paper handy, because you're going to hear little words that resonate with you that Kathryn Burmeister is putting out to you. The fact that she's the happiness lawyer, think about that. The fact that she's a guide for people to up the status quo within. This is heart, mind, and body, people. This is not separate.
Absolutely.
So talk to me about your practice, the happiness lawyer.
Yes. So through my personal brand, I work with high-level professionals. A lot of my clients are lawyers. Turns out comes with the nature of the business, being a lawyer myself. But as the happiness lawyer, my goal is to guide these professionals to their version of happiness. Unfortunately, there's plenty of people out there that are unhappy, and there's plenty of people beyond these individuals that are addicted to the status quo. But because of my experience becoming an entrepreneur and what I went through to hit my rock bottom professionally, it may impact my personal life, but it manifested in a professional environment first. I believe I can connect with those individuals more readily. And so through speaking, writing, and guiding these professionals to their happiness in a confidential, welcoming, and relatable environment, that allows me to help them live a fulfilling life, which is ultimately what leads them to happiness.
Well, within the context of what you're talking about, how do you define happiness?
Yes. So it's this typical lawyer response, right? It depends.
I always say it depends. And people go, oh, you just don't want to tell the truth. I said, no, because it depends on the individual.
That's it. It's exactly right. So happiness is different for everybody. Happiness manifests in living the best version of yourself. But again, figuring out what that version is what you have to do. So with all my clients that I work one-on-one with, I start with, okay, who are you now? Once we understand that, where do you want to be? And then how do we get you there? Because to me, if you just say, okay, be happy, first of all, like you said, what does that mean? If for everybody, it's different. So I'm never going to have a one word answer for the person that I meet inside of 5 minutes. Beyond that, if you don't understand where you are now, you're not going to know how to avoid repeating the same problems that you've done in the past. And then learning how to get there, you need to have some sort of guideposts. So to me, one of the biggest things that I do is I tell clients to think of themselves as a human startup. So like we do mission, vision, values for companies. I believe in doing that for yourself as an individual, because if you have guideposts, it's almost like the boundaries on a soccer pitch. If you know where to work within, then you have a little more guidance on how to operate and how to play the game. And in this case, it's life, how to operate in life. But if you just say, okay, change, free for all, go forward. It's like, all right, like I don't even know how would you even know to change or how to change something if you don't have anything different around you? Clearly, again, if it was as easy as just saying, be happy, we all would be doing it. So I get really granular in helping people make that process methodical. And part of it, I think, is the lawyer in me, but also it's how I did it. It's how I overcame my addiction to the status quo. And then I really focus on neuroscience. I'm a big fan, like I said, of the science and psychology behind things. I'm by no means a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but the neural pathways that are formed from habits, and that's what I really focus on. So I focus on addiction and habits, both the chemical, so I understand the difference between the chemical and action. So this is, when I say status quo, that's what I typically talk about are the actions. And it forms, think of it like a water running down a hill. If it keeps running on a certain path, it's just going to keep, going into the ground and washing away the dirt. So you're going to have this little ravine and this little path. And then if you want to change it, and in our case, it's changing to a healthier lifestyle, avoiding the status quo, identifying it and changing what we do, we have to make the water go somewhere else. Well, it's really difficult if the water's been flowing that one direction for how many years of somebody's life, 30, 40, 50 years, and then you go and change it. It's possible, but you have to be so incredibly conscious of it. So working with people to understand the neurological impact and stopping that, I won't say self-fulfilling prophecy, but it's our knee-jerk reaction for what we would do in a normal situation, and changing our mindset so we can start building that path and carving out that part of the road or the ground that's a different pathway.
Okay, so people should start by taking an inventory of who they are, why they're here, what they want. Absolutely. And what they don't want.
Absolutely.
Because people don't really know that there's an opposite there. When you want something, there's something else that you don't want.
And sometimes it's easier to do what you don't want first.
Yes.
So starting there's nothing wrong with that. But then, of course, like you said, there's a pairing. If you don't want that, what do you want? If you're being really honest with yourself and not worrying about what people think. And that's the biggest hurdle for most people to overcome, is letting go of what others think of them. And it's incredibly difficult, especially for these people that I work with predominantly. their life, and my life included, was set from an early point in our, in our existence to achieving these goals, whether it's becoming a lawyer, doctor, financial person. I talk in my book about zero-sum professions. And those individuals are, if we're not winning, we're losing, sometimes in a very real sense. Doctors are dealing with people's lives. I deal with winning and losing cases, and thank goodness I'm not in this profession or particular practice area, rather, but people on death row. Even elite athletes, people may scoff at it, but if they aren't winning, they're losing, and their value is tied to what they accomplish during a game. There's, guess what? Always going to be a loser, right? That's just the way it happens typically. So really overcoming the idea of I am what I can or cannot accomplish, and instead focusing on who you are as an individual. And that takes a lot to reverse after a long period of time.
My favorite NASCAR driver, and I only have one, he says, if I'm not winning, I'm losing.
Yep.
The only thing he wants to do is win, which he's done quite a bit of.
I see it, and honestly, I'm a Formula One fan. So I see it a lot with Lewis Hamilton, who is a 8-time world champion now. And he's worked really hard on his mental outlook, and a number of the other people that are on the grid right now currently have really spoken up about it, which is good. And they're publicly acknowledging the challenges that accompany mental health and them in this profession, but every individual, and normalizing it, which is what you can do, your listeners can do, to help have a conversation where we all start moving in the same direction and start moving away from the status quo. Is also just normalizing. When somebody asks you how you're doing, think inside. Not everybody you're going to say, oh, I'm not doing well, but you can think internally and really say, how am I doing? Am I okay?
Right.
Is this really what I want?
Yeah. Ask the question, and don't compare yourself to anyone else.
No.
That's one of the huge problems that people have. Mary, Joe, Harry, whatever, they are doing X, Y, and Z, and I'm not. So I am not as good as they are, which is not the truth, because everybody's got their own issues and problems.
Absolutely.
So how can people find you, Kathryn?
People can find me at thehappinesslawyer.com. I have access to my social media on there, my book, what I'm working on. So plenty of material on there. I love to connect with people and hear from them. I'm always responding to messages that I get. I just love hearing from individuals that are looking to change themselves.
And your book, where can they find your book? Overcoming?
Amazon. Yes, okay. Amazon, Overcoming Addiction to the Status Quo.
Okay, so everybody is taking notes. Will be taking notes after the end of this podcast. They're going to be sharing, as I always say, share with people you know, like, and love. Share with people you don't like. Because somebody may need a boost and you might not be aware of what their needs really are. And Kathryn's information here is invaluable. There's no price on peace. There's no price on joy. You just have to find it. You have to search for yourself. Sorry, or get in touch with Kathryn Burmeister at thehappinesslawyer.com. I want to thank Kathryn for being here today and sharing some powerful experiences and stories about her own life and how to benefit yourself. And thank you for being here, Kathryn.
Thanks, Joanne. I appreciate it.
Okay. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sanity Project podcast. Please go to AskJoanneVictoria.com to listen to more podcasts. Check out Joanne's coaching programs and get a free copy of her report, 5 Steps to Achieve Life-Work Harmony. That's AskJoanneVictoria.com. Take care, and thanks for being here.